Are we ready?
Yes.
So since the two of you have some experience with attending conventions similar to Imagi-Con, and you know so much about various aspects of these events, I'd love for you to do a kind of introduction to conventions for whoever is listening. For those who've never been to one like this, or who may not even know what exactly they are or what they're about. I know that no two convention experiences are going to be exactly the same, but if you could just kind of generally in broad strokes cover what they're about, that would be great. And I suppose the ones who are that we're discussing today are kind of at their root would be described as fantasy/science fiction conventions that have expanded to include a lot of other things. So first, why do you think people want to attend conventions like these, and why do you attend conventions like these?
Well, I think, starting from the beginning, I grew up loving comic books in particular, but it's all things science fiction and fantasy in general, especially growing up in the 80s when there were so many great fantasy films in theaters with Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Legend, Lady Hawk. Apparently, a lot of them starting with L as well, which is kind of weird. But that, and then my love of comic books, there came a point where I realized, hey, creative people make these things, these comics, these movies, and there are these places called conventions or Comic-Cons, short for comic convention, where these people will go and you can go meet them and talk to them about their work that you enjoy. And so I lived in small towns in South and Central Georgia growing up, and I would always see ads for these conventions in bigger cities in my comic books, never thinking that I would be able to go to a convention and actually get to meet those people. And so that's kind of what drives me to conventions, is just getting to meet the people behind the stories that I love. What about you?
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it. And then also it's sort of being in an area with, especially say like growing up as a geek in the 80s with loving all science fiction and fantasy and comics, so well, less so comics. But with comic properties, like, I watched the cartoons. It wasn't really accepted in general popular, you often were made fun of for those things. And so being in a place where you're with other people who have very similar interests, it just feels like home, very much in that. So I like that. And I loved, especially for somewhere like Dragon Con, where there's so much cosplay costuming going on, just to see the amazing things that people do, and the creativity and their skill is just really amazing.
So what are some of the fandoms that are catered to during these conventions? Can you just, I know there's a lot, but can you name a few of maybe the main ones?
Yeah, we may just talk about general genres would probably be.
Well, I mean, you have, it kind of depends on the size of the convention, because we've been to conventions where it's focused on one movie, to where you have more conventions focus on multiple properties. So you've got comic books, just the medium of comic books. It could be superhero, it could be fantasy, horror, it could be anything, slice of life. You have some that are very comics focused. More so now, a lot of them are focused on science fiction and fantasy television and movies, and just art in general, because you'll have artists who come and they'll either paint pictures of characters from these properties or just their own work. So it's a wide swath of things. And we go to, Karen mentioned Dragon Con, which for the people who don't know, it's the largest convention in the Southeast in Atlanta every Labor Day weekend. And the programming there is so diverse that there's a track for science. There's a track for basically philosophy. There's a track for Star Wars and fantasy and literature and movies and classic movies and classic literature,
Puppeteering.
puppetry, which we love.
Classic TV.
Just in general, beyond even science fiction. And so there's this, and then there's art, and there's this wide swath of
Gaming.
things. Gaming in particular is the big, where DragonCon came from. But there's just so many things, especially more of your conventions that are trying to cater to a wide swath of the fandom, of the populace. They're going to have a little bit of everything because they know that not everyone's into one thing.
We should also mention anime and manga.
Yeah. Well, yes. We figure we would delve into that a little bit later as well as we get into what you can find.
Generally not our thing, but definitely.
We support
thing,
it.
So.
Yes, we're completely 100% in support of those who are.
So when a convention is held, and I know no two are alike, but generally, how long do they normally last?
It does vary, as you said. Most small ones are 1 to 2 days if they're getting started. So the smallest one we've been to was a 1-day, like 8-hour convention. The small ones that we've had in Montgomery have been 1 to 2 days of about 8 hours each for those. Then you have the beasts like DragonCon that take place around holiday weekends and, you know, start out as 2-day conventions that grow into 3-day conventions, that grow into 4-day conventions, that grow into 4.5-day conventions. And you will eventually take up an entire, week of the year. But you don't have to commit to all those days to go and enjoy a large convention. You can just go and enjoy a day or two for most of them. You don't have to, if your time off doesn't allow you to do it, it shouldn't be a all or nothing thing. You can still go and have a good time.
I know some conventions, they go on into the nighttime. Not all of them, but some of them do. Now, for the ones that have quote unquote nightlife, what is that like? And is it different than what goes on during the day?
Typically, yes. So we have been to many conventions where, and just, for those who are new to conventions, we started out with DragonCon, which had nightlife fairly early on. And nightlife there consists mainly of concerts. And by nightlife, we mean all night until wee hours of the morning, which we never see because we're old people who need to go to sleep so we can function, because there are still panels we want to go to at 10 a.m. featuring these creative people we've talked about. But there's concerts and some tracks, which they call them tracks at the larger conventions. You'll have the horror track or the puppetry track or the Star Trek track or the Star Wars track, where all the programming is devoted to a particular topic. They will have panel discussions going into the night, or they'll have storytelling. One of our favorite things that the X track, based on X-Files and other creepy stories, used to do is a ghost stories every Saturday night. And you go in around 10 or 11 o'clock, and there would be professional authors reading ghost stories.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a great way to cap off the evening. But I will say that we were really kind of heartbroken when we went to our first non-DragonCon convention, because it does not have, they mostly don't have nightlife. What a person should expect is is mainly the show floor, and all of the vendors and all of the artists and all of the creators and all the displays are happening in this one big room, usually a big convention hall with concrete floors and tables. And there might be panels, 1 or 2 panels that happen in different rooms in the same building. But to our great sadness, we discovered that 6 or 7 o'clock at night, when those doors close, that's it. There is not. So
Now, it's possible there may be some after parties, but more likely to be at restaurants and bars and things like that. And you kind of have to be in the know and have connections to.
It's not like an official convention thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Friends
And-
meeting up and
And
Yeah.
obviously, and families can't attend together because they're tapping at places where it's like 18 and only.
Yeah,
go.
and the one thing we should say about Dragon Con, kind of what maybe after 8 or 9, is that it's less family friendly. Particularly with costumes, people tend to be a bit more risque with that.
what kinds of celebrities make appearances at conventions, and in what ways do fans get to interact with them?
Well, the first way, what kind of celebrities is all sorts. I remember the very first celebrity that showed up at a convention I attended was the late Richard Hatch, who was on the original Battlestar Galactica. He purchased a table in the vendor hall and just set up to sell pictures of himself, and he would autograph for you. And that was a brand new thing many, many years ago. And now there's a whole industry where actors will sign up with agents who sponsor them at various conventions.
Yeah, essentially be on the convention circuit.
Yeah, and they travel around and make a lot of money doing convention signings. But what most of them do is you'll have a table where the actor will be sitting, and you get in line and go up, and it varies between $20 and $60 to purchase an autograph photo from the actor. And others become more popular these days is a photo op, where they have a professional photographer wait for you with the actor, and the actor stays there. And we've never done that, but
Well,
some people have had
sort of.
we did once,
Yeah.
but I've heard varying experiences where you're either kind of ushered in really quickly and have a very quick moment with the actor. But if you can find something to do or say or wear that catches the actor's attention, you may get a bit more time than they're supposed to give you, because they want to hang out with you for a minute. Like, marriage proposals have happened in front of actors, and just, showing up in a certain costume or bringing a prop for them to kind of pose with you with, rather than just kind of walk up and get a hi and yeah, because I have a friend who had a very awkward picture with Gillian Anderson from the X-Files, because she was still early in her convention appearances and was not comfortable with the whole concept of strangers getting photos with her, one after the other in succession.
Yeah, and then some conventions handle it a little bit differently. Talk a little bit about Wizard World.
World?
Yes.
Well, some conventions, like with Dragon Con, there's a couple of vendors that will sell these experiences. And
No, I should say, as far as some of this stuff, usually with the photo op things, as opposed to, it kind of depends on how popular the actor is. So if it's a less popular actor, then they usually just have booths and you can just walk up, those kind of things. But for really big actors,
well, they sell packages,
Yeah.
just like you're getting your school pictures. They'll sell you a package of either a digital photo, or you can get prints of your moment. The bigger for-profit conventions like Wizard World that we attended in New Orleans a couple times, they are constantly trying to upsell you on moments with the actor. Like, you can have a private one-on-one with the actor for a few minutes. You can have a photo with the actor. You have them sign multiple, like, you pay like per item to get your thing signed. But then you can go to smaller conventions and they're just happy to go up and you take something that they were in and they sign it, and they're probably going to charge you, because typically what actors do is they'll lower their appearance fee and make up that money with the sales for selling their autograph. So yes, you may be paying an actor to sign an item you already purchased, but if it means something to you, it's probably worth just their time as a thank you. And a lot of them also end up putting that money into charities that they sponsor as well. But
Now, if they're there to promote a particular project, how does that work?
As far as when they're doing speaking and things,
Mhm.
well, they will have on occasion a panel where they really just want you to ask about that particular project. And that's more in a panel setting, where a moderator might, if you wanted to ask this actor who's been in Star Wars about this little, small production they did on Broadway, the moderator might steer the conversation back to Star Wars. But you can always go up to the actors as they're sitting at their tables, and really in fact, my piece of advice, the more obscure things that they've been in, that you can manage to get to watch and talk about, the better. Because you can get a lot of face time if you tell them that you saw them in this little tiny Broadway production and really enjoyed it, than you would if you're one of the hundreds of thousands of other people who take them a picture of their character from the big movie.
Yeah.
So they know that you're following their career path.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
That's a
like,
big
even for
compliment.
instance, we met Bruce Campbell, and most people know him from Army of Darkness.
Evil Dead.
Yeah, Evil Dead. But what we brought him to sign was his Briscoe County Jr.
A box set of his TV show, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. And so we're the only people in this line full of people carrying Ash from Evil Dead posters and toys with Briscoe County Jr. And so he spent a little bit of extra time talking to us. And as he walked away, he said, good choice.
That was really neat.
It was really neat, because there is some thought that you can put into increasing your face time with your favorite actor.
Mhm.
Well, that's one art form, is the acting. What other art forms are normally given representation at events like this? And do you have a favorite art form you like to see when you're there?
We do. Now, again, we'll say, we'll talk about Dragon Con second, because it's kind of its own beast. But every convention, you're going to have artists. There's artists who will do their versions of different properties. You'll see their version of Batman, or a fairy, or a demon, or Superman, or this kind of superhero. And they're just trying to sell their prints, because they're up and coming artists, or they'll sell their own works. And then you'll have actual comic book artists who are bringing their work. You can buy their original pages that may have been printed in comics, or prints of their other work featuring characters you love. And you'll also see them and authors of both comics and prose books at conventions, at pretty much every convention. But then you get into the larger conventions, and you get things like puppetry, which is our favorite art form to take in at Dragon Con. As Karen mentioned, there's a whole puppetry track. So you can both learn the craft of puppetry if you're so inclined, but also take in puppet shows. So you can be a passive or an active participant in it. And then, Dragon Con also has the professional art show, where they have their wares, and it can be mixed media. It can be, one year there was this giant Western 3D diorama town.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
With an underground with creatures in it, and it can just be a wide variety of media.
Jewelry,
Yeah,
sculpture, music.
yes.
Now, music is a sort of a separate thing as well. They have both during the day. There'll be little bands that'll do performances.
Well, it's the same
just for
bands,
DragonCon,
the
but
same bands, but they'll do performances on a smaller venue.
scale. Yeah. And then there are also some larger concerts as well at night. And this is for DragonCon. So that music you may not have as much in some smaller conventions.
As we were discussing earlier, some of the smaller conventions in the Atlanta area, because so many people attend DragonCon, they've sort of modeled themselves as little Dragon Cons. And so they do have music after hours, or it's still part of their convention hours actually, but once the programming has ended for the day, there's at least one concert that everyone can attend if they choose to do so.
Would you say that as far as accessibility, with fine art and music, it also kind of depends on how famous people have become. Is it less likely to run into, say, a famous fine artist and get their autograph on something as opposed, or are they a little more accessible than big celebrity names?
Well, typically the artists just stay in the art show, and the comic artists, even the celebrity comic book artists, stay in the comics artist alley. So you can just come and go to them because they'll stay at their table for a set number of hours. And there might be a small line of people who are waiting, and you may have a longer wait with them because there's less pressure for paying people to be moved through the line. But your waiting is rewarded because then you'll get your 10 to 20 minutes conversation. We've even been in situations last couple of conventions where the artist didn't really want to let us go. The creator of Darkwing Duck just kept us for like 20-25 minutes, and other people were coming up to his table to have things signed, but he would turn and sign them for them, but he was enjoying the conversation with us. And so we're soaking up this experience of the man that created Darkwing Duck. Is just and the Aladdin, the TV cartoon that was adapted from the Aladdin movie from Disney, he created that too. And so he's wanting to spend time with us.
That's flattering.
Yes.
That's a good memory.
And the inker of the Doom Patrol comic book, Doom Patrol is now a TV show on HBO Max, very, very well regarded. The inker of the original comic would not let us go. He just, once we got him on his topic, he just kept talking. And those are some of the best, experiences. But to answer the question, yes, they're more accessible because they just sit out, and you don't really have to, you don't have to buy anything from them. You can just go up and have a conversation with them. Now, if you probably should take something that they have worked on to have signed, or maybe purchase a little small something.
But maybe not everything that you have that they've worked on.
Yeah, don't take your entire collection of novels by a certain author and ask them to sign every single one, because that's just kind of rude for their time and everyone else's time too.
Yeah. I was trying to remember how Megacon was, since it was a little bit more comic.
Well, Megacon is another story. It's a convention in Orlando that we went to a long time ago. And they had bigger comic book celebrities, but you could still get in line. But there, the publishers were kind of determining the time that was allotted to them. And so they would strictly adhere a certain start and end time for those writers and artists. So you just had to get in line early if you wanted to make sure that you met them.
And take one favorite thing, not a whole.
Yeah, there's usually rules, yes.
Yeah.
On like one item or two items, they would sign for free. But if you wanted 5 or more, you might have to pay a little something, because then they start to think maybe this person owns a shop, or they just want to sell this item with my autograph on eBay. And they're usually less willing to do that for no financial pay for that.
And your favorite art form at conventions would be the puppetry. Is that a good guess, or is it something else?
Oh no, it's puppetry for sure. Because we're trying to decide what we're going to do, and if there's a puppet show we can get into, we're going to go to the puppet show. Just because we love puppetry, and we love the technical proficiency that's required in puppetry, and I just have always loved puppets anyway. So it's our favorite thing.
What types of competitions are held at conventions, and what types of awards are given?
Okay. Well, I can actually say that most of conventions will have some type of costume contest. I think the awards probably vary between conventions. I know, for instance, for DragonCon, one of the things they give out are basically vouchers that you can buy stuff in the dealer's room. So
other places will have a cash prize.
Yeah, cash prize.
Because they can't guarantee you're going to be able to spend X amount of money and what's left of the convention, because usually it's held
fairly
toward
late
the end of the
convention.
convention. But we have been to a hair and beard competition at Dragon Con in the alternative history track that focuses on steampunk and Victoriana. That was, tremendously fun.
I think that was maybe just a certificate.
I think that was a certificate. There was no cash prize. But there's the quick draw competition that they've been done for years for comic book artists, where they have this challenge and you've got to draw the challenge in a certain amount of time. The art show is usually juried at some point. And then of course there's just games to be played as well, the tournaments.
But aren't there like robot?
There's like robot wars, robot battles in some conventions, and professional wrestling at some as well, not just Dragon Con. There's some at other conventions as well. I think the ones in Montgomery had a wrestling one night. Yeah. So yeah,
I think doesn't Dragon Con have awards for authors as well, fantasy and sci-fi authors?
Yes, they have the Dragon Awards, where it's more like a formal Oscars, Emmys, Grammys kind of thing. Fans can vote, which is the different thing about it. But yeah, it's actually a formal dinner with a formal presentation of awards. That is less typical. Like larger conventions like San Diego Comic-Con, there are awards that are awarded around the convention time, like the Eisners, which is the Oscar of the comic book world. But that's not it's not something the convention itself gives out. It's just something that another organization issues during the hours of the convention.
What about if I wanted to go shopping? Are there ways to shop at conventions normally? And what types of items are available to purchase? How are they different than what you might, say, find at a mall somewhere?
You want to start with that?
Oh, you want me to start with that? Okay. Well, as I said, Dragon Con is and he's already said our Dragon Con is more of what we mostly do. And so obviously, depending on the size of the convention is what you're kind of going to find. And so we'll have things like artists who are selling their prints. So if you look behind us here, this is actually a really good example. Those are really nice.
Francesco Francavilla.
Yeah.
So
that's some of his prints. And so you can see Batman and Poison Ivy over here. And then this is from one of his own works. And then on the far side over here is a Zorro that he did. So there's an example of that. Now Dragon Con has their own merchandise. So you can, like this little hoodie here.
Nice.
They have other things as well. But as we talk about this prints, there are all sorts of geek things you can get. A lot of times you'll actually even find things that are classic toys. You can pick up some G.I. Joe figures. They have there's clothing. You can get fantasy kind of stuff. You can get corsets. You can get steampunk stuff. You can get top hats. You can get goggles.
But let me tell
wings.
Wings. But there's also one item that you got at Dragon Con that you can get at other conventions too, that you really definitely can't find at the mall.
Oh yes, my elf ears.
Elf ears.
You cannot find elf ears at the mall.
Yes,
if you learn nothing else from this entire conversation, audience, you cannot find elf ears at the mall. But there's every convention though. In fact, most conventions are really shopping. The two conventions that have been here in Montgomery recently said they are traditional conventions, limited hours, one big con floor, maybe one panel going on.
Yeah, and then usually only one really, really big-ish guest.
The rest of the time, it's the vendors. And like we're into Funko Pops. It's like most vendors have Funko Pops. But there's also, like Karen was saying, these vintage items that you can only find at conventions. Not there's toy stores hardly anymore anyway, but you can find a Star Wars toy from the 80s that you've been looking for forever, or a She-Ra doll from the 80s that you've been looking for forever that you're not going to find at a shop because they're vintage. And you might find them at a vintage store, But you can walk into a convention and maybe find multiples of them from different vendors and might be able to work out a deal because they know the audience they're trying to cater to there.
As far as volunteer work at a convention, can you volunteer to help out, and what are the perks of volunteering?
You can. Perks vary. Some is simply the joy of volunteering. Others, after so many years of volunteering, you can get a free pass to the next convention. But then also you can work your way up into the higher tiers of volunteering, end up getting assigned to help an artist or an actor or a writer at their table. So you might end up getting to spend, the weekend with your favorite artist or writer or actor, but you've got to do the grunt work first. They don't just assign you that to start with. They got to make sure you're good with regular people before they're going to let you trust you with the people that they're paying to come and meet everybody.
And what kind of things could I, as someone in attendance, see and experience at a convention? What sorts of experiences do they offer that I might not have anywhere else?
Well, as we kind of alluded to earlier, Karen was talking about, the biggest thing is you're going to be surrounded by people who love the same properties, characters, and stories that you love. And the knowledge that there are other people out there, for one thing, because I grew up in small towns where I was the only kid who loved comics and who loved science fiction and fantasy. So, to meet one person, in your town was just the best thing in the world. And then you go into a convention, regardless of the size, even here in Montgomery, you walk up and you see people dressed as characters you love. Well, automatically the two of you have something in common. And they're hanging out with people who are also enjoying that. And so you start to feel the sense of belonging. So you get all sorts of really great chemicals firing off in your brain because you found your people. And that's probably the biggest asset that you get from a convention that you can't get anywhere else. Because you get this mass sense of love for shared experiences. Especially if you're the kind of person who's drawn to things that most people in your town were not drawn to.
Now, how do conventions, once they've gotten started, how do they benefit the community at large? I know they're good for business, correct? And
Yes.
They're good for charity as well?
As well as the bigger they get, the bigger the economic imprint and impact they have on the town. Because you draw people from, like even our small conventions are drawing people from around the state to come in, and they need to spend money at restaurants and hotels. And then
They may go do touristy things in the city that they're in because they haven't done it before. And so there's that too.
Yeah. But then they also will the convention will often pick a local charity to sponsor
support.
and have frequently they'll have contests. And for instance, at DragonCon, the different track rooms, they will have a contest where so DragonCon will pick a charity, and then each track can decide how they're going to raise the money. So for example, at the last DragonCon in the horror track room, they had a jar for Freddy and a jar for Jason. And so you determine who won by where you put your money. So if you were split between the two, you could still give to both. You're still going to the charity, but you could you could vote for your favorite slasher.
And I have to bring up, I was so moved last time I was at DragonCon to see the long line to give blood donors. That was very impressive.
Yes, that is a really, really big thing at DragonCon. I don't know of any smaller convention that does that. I know San Diego does, and maybe some of the larger ones.
Probably.
But have started probably maybe in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
I've started in the last 5 years to give blood. And now the thing is, now particularly with Dragon Con, and this may be with some other conventions, but definitely Dragon Con, a lot of people who go to Dragon Con like to drink at Dragon Con. So because of that, they tend to want to give blood early before their convention starts. And so I just do it because I don't want to have to try and fit it in with the rest of the convention. But so I also give blood early, which means that the line is very long the first day. But what's really neat is that really gives you also an opportunity to meet other people. I last time or the time before?
Time before.
Time before. So not last year, or not the last time we had a physical Dragon Con, but the time before, I actually ran into a guy that Matt went to high school with. And we were in line, and so we got to have a nice long conversation. And then I've also had some, it's really great, it's a great geek conversations of like, talking about like games. So, tabletop and card games, and what's fun, what do we like, came a guy who who's really, really much more into gaming than I am. But we talked about one of our favorite ones, which is called Gloom, and we're like, yeah, it's not so much, it's like it doesn't really matter who wins in this game, but it's the stories people tell, because people make up stories for Gloom, and there's just so much fun. But it is, one of the sponsors is there's the Robert Heinlein, the favorite famous science fiction author, the society, they actually also sponsored the blood drive. That's a big thing. And then Dragon Con, they also have special shirts that are made up specifically for Dragon Con. And they're actually the reason why I started giving blood at Dragon Con was because one year they worked out with the Bela Lugosi estate. And so they had one that had Dracula on the back of it. It's Bela Lugosi as Dracula. And I was like, oh man, how cool is that? And how perfect is that for a blood drive? Usually the shirts just have dragons on them. But they're pretty cool. Like I think the last one had dragons, but with the Atlanta skyline on it. So that was really, really cool. But they do have blood drives. I know San Diego also has a blood drive, and I think maybe some of the other larger conventions do as well. But it actually lasts the entire convention.
Yes.
So if you don't want to go for a long line, it isn't necessarily going to take you this huge chunk of time and wait a long time. I know. I know a friend who went, and his wait, he went later, and his wait wasn't really that long.
I know you and Matt have both mentioned you used to stand in line to get your pass
Yes.
to the convention, and that was actually a really special experience because you get into conversation with people while you're in line.
And that's the thing, is that you have to take advantage of those moments, because you can be stuck in a line, but like I said, you're stuck in a line with people who at least are interested in, even for the big registration line, for fantasy and science fiction and similar things. So you can start having conversations. You may never see them again, or you could decide you really want to hang out with them. But and it's easier because typically introverts are drawn to these kind of properties and these kind of stories. So you're all introverts in this line. So once one of you breaks the ice, then it just completely melts, and you all start geeking out about the same things. But it also kind of helps to really wear your passion on your sleeve, or your chest, or your head, or your costume, or something with your t-shirt, because it's easier to find your specific subgroup within the larger convention subgroup if you're wearing a little something that indicates exactly what is your biggest fandom of interest.
Yeah.
Have you made some good friends through moments like that have lasted, some friendships?
Not us. I mean, a lot of other people have. That's just not we don't really do those kind of things. We've had neat experiences though. We
end up meeting up with people who we knew prior because they come to Dragon Con every year. Because we met because of our shared interest, either in college or in previous jobs, but we never see them except when they come to Dragon Con.
Which, well, we should say we are from Georgia, so
Yeah, we're from
that
Georgia.
helps.
So, but it is an opportunity, and people do it because that these are your people. And so you can, we used to notice there was this sort of lonely Doctor Who cosplayer who he was a little awkward, socially awkward, but he was always go to the photo ops and hang out at the panels. And we decided, okay, if he is by himself again, the next time we see him, we're just going to scoop him up and keep him with us for a while. But then we found him again, and he had found his friends. And so he's with those friends. And so that's just the cool thing about it.
Yeah. Now, as far as being in line, I was also thinking that reminded me of because Dragon Con really is its own beast, and they have all sorts of interesting things that they do. And so, groups of people just start on their own, not really officially from con. For instance, there's something called Swag and Seek, where people make these just cute little things. It could be, special little dice that people have made, and they'll sit around various things based on different intellectual properties, just, cute little buttons. And this is a new thing that kind of started. And so some people hand them out and some people hide them for people to find. So one of the things that happened when we were waiting in line is that there were a couple of ladies who were wearing t-shirts that said "Cake or Death."
So there's a sketch by the comedian Eddie Izzard, where the idea is that it's someone in a medieval torture chamber, and they're offered two choices: cake or death. And so the obvious answer would be, cake. So they're wearing t-shirts that say "Cake or Death." So Aaron said,
"Cake, please." And so they get into their backpacks and they give out a little death.
No.
And so they said when they run out of cakes, they're like, "Nope, sorry, no cake. All I have is death." And it's this little sticker, like skull and crossbones.
Yeah. But if you say death, you also get a little sticker or a card. Yeah. And that's just something that people decided to do just to enhance the communal spirit of the convention.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I know we'll get into this in a little bit later, but every year I go as a female version of the Fourth Doctor from Doctor Who. And so in the past few years, people have been like handing me out. They hand me stuff. Like I got like a little miniature 3D printed TARDIS, which is super cute. And then a few other things that I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, because just a brief moment to show appreciation for the costume. And you may never see this person again, but they needed to share something with you in that moment. And so you'll treasure those moments forever.
I was going to ask you about your costumes and what were some of your favorites. I know that Karen, your Doctor Who costume has actually shown up online a time or two. I've seen your picture.
Yeah, it tends to float around.
But she's BuzzFeed famous.
Yeah, it was a BuzzFeed article that was
fabulously femme doctors.
So people who've done female versions of the different doctors. Although I will even say that it's not the best picture because I hadn't quite got everything set with my costume. So I actually had the 10th Doctor's sonic screwdriver and not the 4th. Because at the time they didn't actually have an inexpensive version of the 4th Doctor's screwdriver. But yeah, that's me being geeky. So but yeah, so that one I do every year, but Matt's done different things.
Probably my favorite, it's gotten the best reactions, has been Dr. Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. Because I just love Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. And so it was very simple because it's just a lab coat I purchased off of Amazon, gray pants, black long sleeve t-shirt, and we purchased a Perry the Platypus plush, and then went to Build-A-Bear and bought a little pink dress for it, because during one episode of Phineas and Ferb, he shoots Perry the Platypus with the ball gowninator. which makes ball gowns appear on people that are shot by the ball gowninator.
And unfortunately, the ball gowninator is sort of more of a gun
It's
type.
little ray guns, just by a
device.
water pistol. So, you know, she spent hours upon hours upon hours making her scarf for her Doctor Who costume. I bought a jacket off Amazon, pair of pants teacher already had, in order to Perry the Platypus and a dress for him. And I was set.
And a water pistol.
And a water pistol. And, you know, and I got probably not as much attention as she did the first year she did her fourth Doctor, but the attention I did get was fantastic. Because people just love Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. And there's even one year there was a
Another one.
young lady dressed as Perry the Platypus with a blue dress and a little duck-billed hat. And so I
did she get a picture?
I did.
Yes.
I did, of course. And then the one year there was the awkwardness of there being another Doofenshmirtz. So, you know, it is a little bit like.
Did you have a battle?
No.
It's a little bit like wearing the same dress at a party. Yeah.
So that said, that because it was a rare costume, it felt a little bit like that. But that is not a reason to not wear the costume of a character you love.
Just be, you know that sometimes, you know, if you dress as Harley Quinn or if you dress as Deadpool, there's going to be a lot of others.
Or even as Karen, if you dress as the fourth Doctor, even as a female version, there's going to be at least one or two other people. But we kind of tend to believe if you're going to do a costume, it should really be a character you love. So you can kind of inhabit that character, and instead of just doing it because it's a popular character.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, I'd make a pretty good Wonder Woman, but I have nothing against Wonder Woman. I'm just not as into Wonder Woman as a lot of other people are. And so I would feel disingenuous if I wore Wonder Woman, people want to talk to me about the character, and I'd just be like, yeah, she's okay. So.
Melinda had touched upon how comparisons are not a good thing, because sometimes you don't want a costume because somebody there is going to have done it so much better. But you're saying essentially it's you're doing this because it's a character you love. It's something you can share with other people. That's the main thing.
Yes, we ran into one. She was probably no more than 14. The Big Barda.
Yeah.
A girl dressed as Big Barda
from DC Comics.
And she was just adorable. It was so cute, and she was so happy that somebody wanted to take her picture, and it was just lovely. Was it show-stopping level? No, but she was just absolutely adorable. So, and then sometimes people's costumes don't even have to be that great. They can just be clever. I love the pun. People love to do pun costumes. So one of my favorites was actually a guy who did Iron Chef. So it's like this plastic apron, but like just the costume Iron Man helmet and gloves and the little
arc reactor
on his chest and a mustard and ketchup bottle.
So yeah, you can be clever with your costume and do a great costume without having it to be, sort of professional, quote unquote, quality.
And sometimes the sound effects are fun. What are the aliens on Sesame Street what do they say? Yip.
Yep.
Yes, there's a whole
telephone.
People that do that. Yeah. And imagine getting on an elevator at a convention with a group of people. It's just fantastic.
Well, and anytime anyone wanted to engage me as Doofenshmirtz, I would go into the Doofenshmirtz voice and start talking to them as if I were Doofenshmirtz, just to heighten the experience for them.
Yeah, and what was great is we actually ran into this family where we wanted to take a picture of the kid because the kid was dressed as
the greatest American hero from the 80s TV show. But you just don't. There's one other person we know who has that costume, an adult. Never seen it on a kid before. So we wanted a picture with him.
But they wanted a picture of him because he was dressed as Doofenshmirtz. That was just fabulous.
But that said, you don't have to wear a costume to go to a convention. We have some friends who we were trying to talk into going like, well, I don't have a costume I want to wear. I'm like, you don't have to wear a costume. And he said, well, all I see are pictures of people in costume. I'm like, well, why would I take pictures of people not in costume? You know, for every one costume, there's probably
10.
or more people who are just in t-shirts and jeans and shorts. So yeah, you don't feel like you have to be into costuming to attend the convention.
What was the first convention you ever attended? What was that like?
Well, for me, it was the olden days of 1992, and we had just moved to Metro Atlanta the summer before. And so I went to my first Dragon Con. And a friend of mine from South Georgia, who was still living in South Georgia, came up. We went there together. And I was so energized by going to panels. And one of my favorite writers was there. And so I basically followed him around a good bit, his different talks.
But it doesn't sound like you're stalking him.
It was a little like I was stalking him, but in a good way. I was so energized by being that experience of finally being around these comic book creators. And again, there weren't a lot of actors at that point, but like TV producers and writers and authors that I didn't eat. I was just so full of excitement from being there that I just went from one panel to the next, just soaking up the experience. I still, try to achieve that experience at least once at every convention I go to this day. I don't remember your first convention, what it was like for you.
I don't know. I don't have as good memory as you do. I went in college after I met him because he was like, hey, let's go to Dragon Con. It was of course much smaller than it is now. Not as, I don't think the hotel staff was quite as accepting.
No.
I definitely remember that. But I don't know. I mean, it's very different since it was a long time ago and smaller. But yeah, sorry, I don't have.
Who are some of the more famous people you've met? Who are you the most excited to meet at a convention?
Well,
Yours is easy. Actually, mine's pretty easy too.
who would you say is the most famous we've met?
Most Stanley.
Stanley, yes.
Stanley.
We passed up opportunities to meet Stanley at Dragon Cons past. But as we were going to Wizard World's New Orleans, we knew the crowds would be smaller. So we decided to go ahead and fork over the cash to have him sign a book that I've had since I was 4 years old that he wrote all about Spider-Man. Not an actual comic book, but a sort of the history of the character of Spider-Man, all about the character. And so that was worth the money to meet him. For me, the biggest thing, as indicated by the Batman shirt I'm wearing, was I got to meet Kevin Conroy, who's been the voice of Batman since 1992 on Batman the Animated Series. It was my favorite incarnation of Batman outside of comic books. And he continues to voice the character today in various games and other animated series and movies. And so that was always a big goal for me, was to meet him, because he hadn't done really many conventions in the South. And so in 2015, when I saw that he was going to be at Wizard World New Orleans, I'm like, we've got to go. So I even had gotten Karen to promise that if he ever came anywhere close by in the region, that we would go. And he did. And so we did. And it was one of the best interactions, because he was genuinely wanted to have a conversation. Karen wanted us to have our own little picture, but he wanted her in the picture too. He's embracing both of us. So that was great. But also, back when the first new Muppets movie came out, and there was a new character called Walter, who was a puppet. And his puppeteer, Peter Lenz, who's a native Atlantan, was at Dragon Con, and we totally stalked him every panel he did. And he didn't have, unlike others, because he wasn't a big celebrity, he didn't have a table. So if you wanted him to sign something, you had to track him down. And so after his talks, he would sign for a few minutes, but then they were making them clear the room for the next panel discussion. And so we were having to sort of hustle after him, and he would go and stand nearby. But he was so sweet.
Such a nice guy.
Such a nice guy, and signed our copy of the soundtrack as both himself and Walter. In much the same way, we were able to meet Carol Spinney, who was Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
No, he had a little table there.
He had a table though,
Yeah.
but
And his wife was there.
as far as
That was,
famous people
yeah.
we have met, and he actually signed the photo as himself and as Oscar and his Big Bird with little word balloons he drew coming from their mouths on the photo
Oh,
to both of
that's a
them.
nice touch.
So,
And then his wife like prettied up his little handwriting. It was so sweet. It was so cute.
yeah,
But then also for me, being a huge Doctor Who fan, we went to Wholana, I think it's penultimate year.
yes.
And because it's no more. And the actress who played Romana, which was one of the Fourth Doctor's companions, was there, and I got to meet her and have interaction with her. And of course, I was dressed as the Fourth Doctor, and so we talked about knitting.
Yes. So she's wearing
that
her
was-
like 20-foot long scarf. So because it's a small convention again, she's the only major guest. So she has a small table to the side of the vendor's room and plenty of time to talk. So they have this whole conversation
Mhm.
about knitting.
About knitting.
Do you both knit?
I think she
You
did a
both
little bit of
Yes, she
knitting.
did.
Yeah, yeah. So.
But you also need to mention Rob Paulson.
Oh, yes, yes. So Rob Paulson, who's a voice actor, and was on Animaniacs and voiced
Yakko.
Yakko and
Other characters, but
Pinky.
Pinky, yes.
So he does a ton of voices. I can't really do a whole lot of voices, but Pinky is one of them. So I did one of the things I asked Rob Paulson was, what's your favorite non sequitur? And so he asked me to do the brain voice. I'm like, well, I don't really do a great brain voice, but I'll try. I'll do Pinky better. And so I don't remember what his answer was though now.
It doesn't. matter.
But anyway, so we actually did back and forth. So I did brain, then he did Pinky, and then he did brain, and I got to do my Pinky voice
For him.
for him. So I think so, brain. But me and Pippi Longstocking. I mean, what would the children look like? I think so, brain. But where are we going to find a duck in the who's at this hour? So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
My
and I had
favorite, my favorite line, I think, from that cartoon. What was it? It was, if we give peace a chance, won't the lima beans feel left out?
I think so, brain. Well, if we give peace a
Yes.
chance, won't the lima beans feel left out?
But yeah, but a lot of actors, they are so happy to have that moment with you as well. Because when I first started going to conventions, especially when actors started coming, that's when I felt really anxious and nervous, was to meet actors. Writers as well, but actors particularly, because they represented your favorite character. Like there was a year when James Marsters, who plays Spike in Buffy and Angel, was there, and he was wearing his costume and his hair was bleached out and spiked. And I turned the corner and it's like, that's not the actor. There's Spike. And I'm like, it's like, and I had to go get his autograph because I promised a friend to get an autograph for her daughter, so I couldn't just chicken out. But you start to become, they're just people.
Mhm.
And some of them, I've had some experiences where they're not the nicest people, or they're distracted by something else. You just have to kind of give them some grace, that you didn't have the moment you wanted. That's okay. but most of the time they're just so happy to interact. So
Yeah. And then the interesting thing about DragonCon is, like, because it's all in hotels, and because, the actors are staying in the same hotels, and they're, going through different places, you're going to see them being people and walking around. And a lot of times with the actors, like, because there'll be different, like, parties for, theme parties, like even for like the shows they've been in and things like that. And they'll come, like, the most of the cast of Battlestar Galactica, the remake, would come to those parties, and people have all these stories about these actors at these parties. So,
Describe some of your favorite convention experiences.
well,
we have
you
been
already
doing
have
that.
it.
But I got so many more.
Well, we can talk
No.
We can talk some about panels. We haven't talked too much about that.
Okay, what do you got in mind?
Well, let's see. What am I thinking about? Oh, the time that we all the time the Firefly panel with what Peter David led. That was sort of fun.
Well, yeah, okay. So on the TV show Firefly, apparently two of the actors were in a flip-off war where they were shooting each other birds. And the show had been canceled. So the lead actor had gotten the last bird, as it were. In the blooper reel for the season, where he had the action figure of himself flip off this other actress. So Peter David, who's one of our favorite writers and who has worked on shows, but particularly because he had worked on a show with the young actor who was in this war with Nathan Fillion, the lead of the show, he arranged for all of us on cue to stand
in the audience.
1,000 people, to stand up and flip off Nathan Fillion. So that's the kind of thing that only happens at a convention. It's a great experience. There's traditions, like at DragonCon, at the masquerade that closes out kind of more or less closes out the convention on Sunday night, last evening of the convention. While the judges are working on their scores, they
the masquerade is the
major costume contest.
Costume contest, yeah.
They play the Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century
Warner Brothers cartoon.
And every time he says Duck Dodgers and the 24th and a half century, everyone in the audience goes Duck Dodgers and the 24th and a half century. And so what's really great, though, is seeing the younger people in the audience who have not experienced that or know this cartoon very well react to all of us doing that. Another great experience, instead of going to a larger concert, they have what they call the Filk track. And Filk is basically music, but done with geeky lyrics. And so we went to a concert given in the middle of the day by the Double Clicks, who's one of our favorite, it's a sister act group. And we went to that and got a full, fairly intimate, hour-long concert from them, which was great. I've had similar interactions as Karen did with Rob Paulson, with an actor from Babylon 5, because his character had an accent. And I told him I'd do your accent. He said, I want to hear it. I'm like, okay. And so I did his accent for him, and he just loved it. And we go, like Francesco Francavilla, who's represented by the art on our wall. He's native to Metro Atlanta, and so he comes almost every year. And so we go and see him every year and buy a lot of stuff from him. And this last time we were in person, I said, just in case we haven't told you, you're our favorite. And he just stopped and put his hand over his heart and just was touched. And it's just so many great moments. And it can be had at smaller conventions too.
Okay, I know you are both librarians and you're both very creative people. I have to tell people a little bit about your Halloween parties because they are outstanding. And I know you sing dirges for us. and you bring to life characters from books I read as a kid that were spooky books, in a dark, dark room, and you dressed as Jenny with the green ribbon. I loved that outfit. And you've done Halloween poetry, and
Mhm.
and so those have been great experiences. So you're very creative, and obviously you love literature. Given that conventions are a hub for various forms of storytelling, I know you attend them for fun and for vacation and time off, but do you feel that being in that environment has had a positive influence in your work and just in your everyday life in general?
Yes. And I was waiting to see if Karen responded with anything, but she's not.
I was letting her answer the question, but as far as work goes, it's going to be lean more toward you.
Well, it does energize me as primarily a children's librarian. Every time I go to the puppetry track, I'm more and more convicted I need to incorporate a puppet into my story times. I still have yet to do it because it takes practice, and that's where I fall down. But another cool thing is they have a young adult literature track at DragonCon and actually some other conventions too. And in some cases, you can go and get professional credit for attending those panels for continuing education. But it's just energizing to be around all that creativity, just from the stuff that you can purchase and the stuff people are making and wearing, and just the stories they're sharing. It just re-energizes, and fortunately, we're very fortunate that we have a pretty big group of friends locally who are as geeky as we are, if not geekier. And a lot of people don't have that, and we didn't for the longest time. So DragonCon and a convention in general is where you would go to kind of recharge yourself, to kind of deal with the rest of the mundanities of life and adulthood and adulting, because this hub of creativity exists.
I have one question. I didn't write this one down, but what advice would you give someone going to a convention for the first time? Like how to prepare? And
depends on the convention. DragonCon has it's its own thing. You have 80,000 people that are converging on Atlanta, and so
I'll start with a small convention. It's a bit easier because you're really going into that one convention room. Take money, take a snack if the venue lets you bring food in, because sometimes the venue will try to gouge you on stuff they sell inside. And just be open, especially for a small convention, be especially open to just meeting other people who are into what you're into. For larger conventions,
and wear a t-shirt that shows what you're into.
Yeah, wear a t-shirt, at the very least, wear a t-shirt that shows what you're into, so that people say, hey man, I'm into this too. And it's easier, especially if you're an introvert, it's just easier to be wearing something that advertises, that says, please talk to me about this thing on my shirt or on my backpack, because I'm too shy to start the conversation with you. For larger conventions, you really need to get the most out of it. You really need to plan ahead. You should look at the schedule if they publish one, so that you'll know what time you need to get there if you're not staying at a hotel that's attached to the convention. So you should take some snacks, because that's something a lot of people miss.
And water.
Take a water bottle
beverage
that you can replenish during the day. A lot of conventions now, including DragonCon, will have an app where you can go in and select the panels and events you don't want to miss.
And always have backups.
Yes.
And be prepared to change, because something's happened, you're going with someone else, your friend wants to see something else, or you've just decided the line's going to be too long because for this thing, because you really want to see this thing. And so, most people have like 3 schedules,
Yeah.
3 plans of what to do.
Yeah. And don't hang your entire hopes for the convention on attending one particular thing, because something may happen and you can't, and you shouldn't let that ruin your convention, because there's so much happening to take in, that you can probably find something else. Like usually our schedule for Dragon Con has 3 to 4 things for every hour.
And then sometimes you won't do anything. We've just decided.
Yeah, sometimes we get worn out and like, we're just going to go sit down and eat something and just take a
people
break.
watch,
Yeah, and people watch.
which is fun. The fun thing to do at conventions. There's even sometimes people will have like a bingo, and so you can people watch and see like, oh, I found a Deadpool, I found a Harley.
And also keep in mind, people in costume usually love to have their picture taken. You should always ask permission first, but you should never be shy about asking permission, because you know, you might be the only person that recognizes the character that they're doing, and that will mean so much to them that you recognize it when hardly anyone else did.
Yeah. Now we've had a year where we dressed up as characters, and nobody recognizes that day. Just nobody.
And also, that said, if you dress up as a character and don't get the attention you think you should have gotten, don't let that ruin your convention either, because it could be someone was too shy to ask about, or they didn't say to you, I really like your costume. So you should wear the costume for your own fun. And if you get attention for it, you should be happy. But if you see a costume you appreciate, you should let that person know you appreciate their costume.
Yeah. And then there's another year where it was at the very end of the day. We only had one person who knew exactly who we were. So but and then with Dragon Con also, they have a tour for newbies. And so I would strongly recommend that you do that, since they'll sort of give you a general overview of like where the hotels are, where restaurants are, et cetera, et cetera. So
I was unaware of that. That's
Yes.
really,
yeah.
that's a great idea.
The ubiquitous question of which hotel am I in?
The carpet usually helps.
Well, because since Karen and I, having attending Dragon Con since the 90s, when it was one hotel, we know our way around that 5-block area of Atlanta that has turned into the footprint of the Dragon. And so I have such empathy for people who are brand new, who are just overwhelmed, and there's 80,000 people around you, and you physically don't know where you are in space anymore. And you're trying to find your friends somewhere else, but you don't even know what building you're in. So yeah, larger conventions, you need to kind of plan ahead and figure your way around. Smaller conventions, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Now, going back to your previous question about, as a creative, what does Dragon Con do instead, or like professionally? Now, professionally, not as much generally, because I am an academic librarian and don't unfortunately get a whole lot of space to be creative. But one thing we do at work is we go all out for Halloween. And so we decorate like the entire first floor of the library, and it's usually themed. And so even though we'll have already had the plans and we've already started working on it, there's part of me that sort of feels like, because of where Dragon Con falls, since it falls in the beginning of September, it sort of further inspires me for the big push for that, to get it all done for Halloween. And then also personally, I'm more into doing the costumes. Matt loves wearing them, but he's like, you do it, you put it together, you figure it out. So I do, I get I usually don't end up doing things lately. So, I've been doing the same Doctor Who costume for a decade now. But I do get so inspired, and it's a lot of other people do too. It's like you see all these fabulous costumes, you're like, oh, I want to do this costume. No, I want to do that costume. It's just because you just see all this amazing things that can be done and all this creativity. So I'm, but it does require dedication too. So
I would have to say one of my favorite things is the parade. I don't know how many conventions have a parade. I don't know.
think Dragon Con is unique in that having a parade. San Diego doesn't have a parade.
So.
No. And fun fact, Dragon Con had to get the city of Atlanta to remove an ordinance limiting the size of parades, so that the parade could grow to the size that it has today. So yeah, that's another thing, the whole other thing where the public gets to soak up the convention without having to go to the convention.
Yeah.
because they're on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, and there's orcs and fairies and goblins and stormtroopers and Cobra and GI Joe and Lego characters and the parade of elements.
Yes, yes, the periodic table.
Periodic table marching down
Um,
Atlanta, and it's just turned into such a goodwill event. I talk about the community benefit. It's such a goodwill event for the community.
It's the biggest parade of the year for them, I think.
It
Mhm.
is.
It is. Well, that's all of my questions. If you guys have anything you want to add, feel free. Thank you for sharing your convention experiences with us. I feel that this is the first time this town has had a convention. So I think you've been the ideal people to ask about what is this all about? Because some people really, they've never been, they don't know. So it's a whole new thing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
For adults, it's like a professional convention, but about fun stuff.
Mhm.
It's like you're not talking about copy machines or paper or spreadsheets. You're talking about
Or
movies
workflows.
or workflows or policies and procedures. It's about music and movies and books and TV shows and comics and anime. And it's just, it's just a great environment to come and meet like-minded people. You'll really find your people at the convention.
Thank you, guys. I
Thank
think that
you.
Thank you.
I think that's everything that I had on my list. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.